Hey guys, my name is Kat and welcome to my channel. I've been trying to go outside more and really soak in these nice days that we're having. So I thought that maybe I would film outside today, or try to, even though I don't really have a good microphone, so we might have some sound issues, we'll see. Regardless, I thought I might let you guys enjoy the outside with me. I don't think I've actually filmed outside since I moved down south, so it's pretty cool. This is the outside of this house. Late Night Editing Cat has a little fun fact for you. That window behind me is actually the window in which I usually film. Not the window, but the room. The window to the room is the window to the room in which I usually film. There are a lot of birds, so we're gonna have to deal with birds. If you've been watching my last few videos, then you know that I want to get down into the specifics of exposure and response prevention therapy for OCD. A lot of it's also applicable to anxiety as well, but regardless, one of the first things that you need to do when you start OCD or anxiety therapy is to make an exposure hierarchy. So that's what I'm going to teach you to do today. And just a disclaimer here, I am not a doctor, I am not a psychologist, I am not a therapist, I am not a professional in any way. I am just a person who went through ERP herself. Another thing is that I understand that for OCD, a lot of us are dealing with some of our biggest fears. I get it. ERP can be very difficult, and in order to start ERP, a lot of times you have to be ready to do it yourself. And that's okay, that's on your own time. There is no structure to when you should or shouldn't do ERP. It's when you're ready. If you're ready to make that leap, I encourage you to. I just wanted to put it out there that I am very sensitive to understanding that it's scary and it's hard to think about these things. It's just not time for everybody out there to start right now, and I'm sure of that. And also, if you are looking to start ERP, I would highly recommend that you seek out a qualified therapist before you start doing it on your own. It can be a lot more difficult to try to do these things on your own as opposed to with someone who knows how to do it really well, and it's their job, and they can guide you in the whole process and help you whenever something comes up that gets in the way of therapy or otherwise, because we all have very specific needs and feelings around these things, and it's good to have someone to talk to about it as opposed to trying to do it yourself. It's also better for motivation. There's a lot of benefits. So I would recommend that you go see a therapist before you take any of my advice too seriously. If you're unable to see a therapist, then I have a few workbooks that I can recommend, so let me know if you have a question about that. I'll let you know what those workbooks are. You can check those out. They're very useful for doing ERP on your own. Now that I've done my disclaimer, let's get into the meat of the video. A hierarchy is a list of things that would be an exposure for you, listed from the least to the greatest. It's often it's called the exposure ladder or the hierarchy ladder because you go up on each rung or down on each rung, depending on how you draw it, but regardless, you go up on each rung as you keep progressing in therapy. Exposure therapy is traditionally practiced with gradual exposure, which means that you start from the easiest exposures and you go up to the highest exposures on your hierarchy. However, new research suggests that it is more effective to pick exposure hardness at random because that more accurately reflects our real life experiences as people with OCD. You know that when you're in the wild, you don't know whether your exposures or your triggers that you encounter are going to be hard or easy or medium. It doesn't really go by any rules in that regard. This research also stresses that we need to have less reliance on the hierarchy and the SUDS level in general because so many OCD patients start getting messed up and focusing too much on the SUDS and on habituation and on the hierarchy, and we start getting stuck on doing therapy the right way instead of actually doing therapy, and that itself becomes an obsession. You know, like when you're so OCD that you get OCD about your OCD. If I can find that research, I'll link it down below. I think it's very interesting and very true, and it's good. I didn't do it that way, but it is good, and my therapist has been doing that with me actually. I originally didn't do it that way, but now I am. Anyway, I don't really do that many exposures anymore in general, but regardless. You'd think if I was a vlogger, I would know how to talk well, but if I find that research, I will link it down below. But regardless, the hierarchy is useful for tracking exposures. So you might have heard that I mentioned the SUDS scale in that monologue. Your anxiety level is rated on the SUDS scale. That means subjective units of distress. I talked about it in a previous video. There's many ways to do the SUDS scale. Some therapists do 1 to 10, some do 1 to 100, some do 1 to 7. And honestly, I would just do whatever you feel most comfortable with. It doesn't really matter how you do it. Another thing is a lot of different therapists use different terms for the kinds of things that I'm talking about here, so like be on the lookout for that. Like when I talk about the things that you do in therapy, I call them exposures because that's how I was taught. Some people just call them ERPs. It doesn't matter, it's the same. Alright, so now I'm going to show you guys some examples of hierarchies, and let's go through this step by step. And I'm also going to do that inside because I forgot my hierarchies inside. Okay, we're back in the usual setup to look at these hierarchies. This is so high tech. Why don't I just scan the thing? No, impossible. So as you can see, there are 4 lanes here. I've had more like general hierarchies without all of these, but I do like the ones with all of these, so I'd recommend using them because it helps you stay on task and remember which fear you are focusing on and what you should be resisting and the core fear. And the thing about fears is that sometimes like focusing on a different fear can be more triggering than another one. Like you might do an exposure and only focus on disgust, and that would be less scary than doing an exposure and focusing on the fact that you've contracted a disease. As you can see here, we have the trigger or the exposure task, what you'll be doing, the specific fear, the resist, the compulsion that you're trying to avoid, or the avoidance that you're trying to avoid, then the SUDS rating. These are all things that would either in the past or currently bother me. So I started with not washing my hands before eating. My specific fear is possibly contracting an illness and also disgust, just generally a feeling of disgust. I'm trying to resist washing my hands, and I'm trying to resist not touching the food or avoiding touching the food or not eating the food that I've touched. I used to do that. My SUDS rating is a 2. Next, I have something that still gets me. Showering in a new place or a place that I perceive to be dirty, and my specific fear is disgust. What I'm resisting is not touching the walls, because I have a common compulsion that when I'm in a new place, in a new shower, and I think that the place is gross, I don't want to touch the walls and I want to avoid touching things as much as possible. So I'll be like showering like this. And my rating for that, I put a 3 for the sake of the scale. And then my next one up would be touching a door handle and avoiding washing my hands. The specific fear would be contracting an illness, and then my rating is a 4. And then I have eating after touching a handle without touching my hands, and for that I am scared of contracting an illness and disgust, and then my rating is a 5. Next, I've kind of skipped a few, but I've gone all the way down to the top 2 exposures and triggers that I have. That is touching the toilet with my butt, my bum, and that's a 9 for me because it's not as bad as touching a toilet with my hand. That's a 10 for me. That's the highest you can go. Touching a toilet seat with my hand, I mean the toilet seat specifically. Although, you know, the lid ain't that much better. Regardless, those would be my highest exposures. And some of you might be thinking, like, touch a toilet with my hand. Like, you might have heard, like, some therapists will have patients lick a toilet or lick a dumpster or put their hand in a dumpster and then lick it, which I've done before, by the way. And so the thing about these is you might think that they are kind of ridiculous because no one would do this in real life. And you're right, most people wouldn't go around licking toilet seats or touching them, even touching them with the palm of their hand, even though most people's hands would graze a toilet seat, right? That's pretty normal. If you have OCD and it's severe enough to seek treatment, you're dealing with fears that are way past normal, a normal level of human fear when it comes to all of these things. Like, anyone could be uncomfortable by touching a toilet or a garbage can, but it doesn't stop them from living their lives. It doesn't stop them from doing things that everyday people need to do to function in our society. That being said, OCD is really weird, so ERP has to be weirder. People who do ERP often employ something that we sometimes call overcorrection, which means that you're doing something way past a normal, typical behavior, everyday behavior, just in order to get those fears out of the way, just in order to expose yourself to those fears and help you to make progress faster. So I like to say that because OCD is weird, we need to get weird with ERP too. And it's true that overcorrection can be very helpful in dealing with these kinds of obsessions, and sometimes just going the normal length like isn't going to do enough for an OCD sufferer because the fear is so extreme and so debilitating. You know, sometimes you need to do those things. And like, I've touched a trash can, I've touched a Tic Tac to a toilet seat and then I put it in my mouth. I did those things at the OCD conference, but regardless, I've done things. I wouldn't tell you to do anything that's dangerous, and neither will any therapist. I mean, there is a level of risk and a level of danger that you could see, and I'm sure you do. You wouldn't avoid those things if you didn't think they were dangerous in some way. But anxiety is not your enemy, and your therapist is not going to do something that will actually put you in any significant level of risk. Hopefully they won't do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. That might be a little bit of reassurance. You're welcome, and I'm sorry to the therapists out there who are showing this to their clients. And Kat, no, don't reassure them. Stop! Hey guys, back again. It's not a new day. I made up this sexual obsessions hierarchy based off of my real life hierarchies, and I wanted to show you that first. And there's a few things that I want to point out to you guys. I was gonna write in sexual obsessions, but so just like fill that in yourself. These two exposures are looking at a piece of paper that says I might be attracted to the trigger person, and then second one, looking at a piece of paper that says maybe I'm attracted to the trigger person. And the funny thing is that how I worded these things made a really big difference in my anxiety sometimes. So this is one example of how you might spread out your exposures and do something that's just like twinge more anxiety provoking. Like for me, the language was a lot different, and then I could also write down like a certainty statement, like I am attracted to my trigger person. That would be the most anxiety provoking, probably like up there like a 9 or a 10, right? Because it's like saying like outright like I am this versus I might be this, maybe I'm this, I could be this. So like adding in that a little bit of like maybe, which is true. Everything is uncertain. So kind of changing your initial compulsion to say, no, that would never happen, or wanting to believe that about yourself, wanting to say that about yourself, no, it couldn't, I would never do that. Just leaving in a little bit more uncertainty and saying, maybe I would do that, maybe I am this, maybe I'll do like this. So I used to look at pictures and think those things over and over. Like I'd look at a picture of him, my trigger person. I'd look at a picture of my trigger person and I'd say, oh, maybe I'm attracted to them. Maybe I like being attracted to them. Maybe I want to act on my attraction to them. And then another thing, which we'll be covering later in the series, is imaginal scripts. Looking at a paper that says something, it's kind of like a precursor to imaginal scripts. But an imaginal exposure or an imaginal script exposure is just writing down a feared situation. And so I wrote down with low detail, medium, and high detail, because that would be less and more anxiety provoking, so I can work up to it. And then if you keep looking, you might notice a pattern that the specific fear is sometimes the only thing that changes in order to change my SUDS level. I almost did a scrupulosity OCD hierarchy based off of what I used to do, but I thought it might not be relatable enough. But I used to be afraid that if I chose the wrong item, I would go to hell. So I used to do exposures where I'd choose the wrong item, and then I would focus, my specific fear would be that I'd focus on was I chose the wrong thing. That was anxiety provoking, but it wasn't too anxiety provoking to the point that I couldn't do it and I would like shut down. Eventually the goal was that I would get to the point where I'd be able to choose something and say I chose the wrong thing and I might go to hell. I will go to hell. Things like that. Which is scary to think about. Even now I still get anxious talking about it. My religious obsessions kind of waned though on their own and went away, so that was nice. I didn't have to go all the way, but it could be a bad thing. It has come back to bite me before. And that kind of really correlates with what I just said with the might be versus maybe. Another thing was I was scared that I was committing adultery basically, or if I were to act on these things I would be committing adultery and I would be like ruining his family and I would be ruining his reputation. But another thing I was scared of is that no one would believe me because everyone loves him. But also I used to think of different things like maybe people will judge me for it, for being attracted to him, or for writing a script about him, or for being a sexual person. One thing that used to really trigger me was maybe I'm a homewrecker. That really triggered me, thinking about the repercussions of the things, the topics that I was thinking about, or the topics that were popping into my head, I should say. My whole point in showing you this is to show you that you can be creative and pick out very like little things to make things slightly more anxiety or less anxiety provoking. And all of these on here are things that I actually did for my sexual obsessions. Even these 10s up here, and I did a 10.5 just to be over dramatic. Tell them that I have obsessions about them, tell them that they're sexual obsessions, and tell them about a specific obsession about kissing them. Honestly, like these things used to make me like 10s, and I would dread my psychiatry appointments because I was so anxious about them. But after doing all of these exposures and over a few years, I eventually did them, and now they're not that hard anymore, and I can go back and visit, and I'm not that anxious when I'm around him. There are fears that still bother me. I get a little anxious talking about it, but I'm doing much better now, and I owe that to exposures. These 10s are now like, being in the same room with him is like a 3. Whenever I go visit, I do try to do an exposure, or if I call him, I try to do an exposure. So we're still kind of keep in touch. So a few more things I wanted to show you. Like, this is a hierarchy for this is a hierarchy for social anxiety, and specifically doing a presentation. I also did exposures for social anxiety. They were incredibly helpful. But here's one kind. You can take ideas from this. There's also a triangle shape. That's fun. That's different. And then this one is this is also for social anxiety. I didn't realize that I'd done that. But yeah, this is also for social anxiety. Like, return an item of clothing to a department store is 35. That used to make me anxious. It still does make me a little bit anxious, but I can actually do it now, and back in the day I would try to avoid it. And even like things like asking for a pen for someone made me anxious. Ordering from a restaurant made me anxious. And then being the best man at his brother's or her brother's wedding. Well, it's a he, best man. Being the best man at his brother's wedding would be like a 98. So you just work on each of these things and lead up to the big thing, and eventually everything gets easier. And you can do these things just like people without major anxiety can. But that's it. That's all I have to say for today. I hope that this was helpful. I was kind of unsure about how to structure this video. So let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if it worked and you understand hierarchies more now. And yeah, let me know what you thought in this video. Like it if you liked it. Dislike it if you disliked it. I won't mind. And subscribe if you want to hear more about mental health and mental health recovery. That's what we're all about here. Thanks for watching. I'm sending you all lots of love. I hope you're getting through these difficult times, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!